Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back for my latest video. For those of you who are new, I like to make these little videos about films that I enjoy and want to share. I try to focus on the ones that I enjoyed instead of just hammering the ones that just weren't for me. But, sometimes when revisiting a franchise or checking out a remake or a prequel, perhaps I may address one that I didn't really care for as much. And of course, if you enjoy this video, please consider, subscribing after giving me a nice thumbs up and hitting that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is usually between 1 to 3 times a week, depends on what's going on. And check out my back catalog, share the video and channel around, stick around to the end, all that stuff, because it really helps out quite a bit. Okay, now that all that's out of the way, let's dive into The Thing from 2011. Yes, technically the third Thing film, though this one suffers from some confusing naming conventions. The same that we'd had for Halloween and Scream and Candyman, and that they just use the same name for this installment rather than adding something else to that title. For those unfamiliar, of course, John Carpenter's A Thing from 1982 was a remake of The Thing from Another World from 1951. He created what is a rarity in film, a remake which many feel actually surpasses the original. And in the case of The Thing in particular, when people refer to the original, most of the time they just seem to be talking about his version, it seems like. And this one is also one of those that many kind of consider it to be a perfect horror film. So, what is The Thing from 2011 about? I mean, I even have my autographed DVD somewhere around here, and even a picture of me, a really old picture of me and John Carpenter when I met him when I was getting that signed. But I could swear that when this one was coming out, it was being marketed as a remake, or at least that's the assumption and understanding that I had, and actually many people seem to have going into it, which I feel is why maybe the film didn't do that well. Because why mess with, a great film that's still worth seeing, for the first time today, one that holds up so well. So indeed, for much of this, I was under that assumption as well when I first saw it for most of the film. But looking back, on the back of the Blu-ray, it even states it's a prelude to, or prequel to, John Carpenter's A Thing, to kind of see what led up to it. So maybe I was just dumb, or maybe the marketing was similar to the Nia DaCosta Candyman, where it just kind of got mixed up. Who knows? But anyways, what is the official synopsis of this one? Well, it states, at an Antarctica research site, the discovery of an alien craft leads to a confrontation between graduate student Kate Lloyd and scientist Dr. Sander Halverson. It's kind of so even there it's kind of focusing on what basically, aside from the characters mentioned, seems like a remake, looking at that synopsis at least. And, but here's the thing, like Candyman, it's not, while Candyman was a sequel and not a remake, this one is a prequel and not a remake. So for those familiar with John Carpenter's A Thing, this is about that Swedish research team who were mentioned in the beginning of the John Carpenter's version of The Thing. It's about everything that kind of led up to the beginning of that film. And it even ends right as the other film is beginning in a way. So everything mentioned about, this team in his film, we get to kind of see what actually happened leading up to that, which is kind of an interesting direction to take that prequel. But before we dive any deeper into this, there are going to be some spoilers for John Carpenter's A Thing, so that'll be toward the end of the video. So if you don't want those spoilers, if you haven't seen what I now call the original, just a heads up there. So now that all that chatter, without actually going into the actual film, is kind of out of the way, let's get into the actual film. So as stated, this team finds a crashed ship in Antarctica. It has crashed like thousands and thousands of years ago. They recover an alien body, frozen in the ice, take it back to the lab for study, and one thing leads to another, and we get some trouble. Shape-shifting trouble like we had in the original John Carpenter film, where one doesn't know who is genuine and who is this alien mimicking somebody else on the team. The biggest standout for me in this film was that since it was made almost 30 years later, there's a lot of CG in this. However, they did a lot of work on practical effects as well, kind of mixed in. They really seem to understand that whenever able, try to use those physical practical effects. But we get this very nice mix. Even though there are some rough shots with the CG that are kind of, mixed in here and there, we still get some really great ones in there. And also, like the original film, we get this very similar feel, that creepy mystery being presented, for these characters, kind of slowly building, but not to a point where one would want to lose interest. We even get a similar runtime at right around 1 hour and 45 minutes. We get some really gross special effects, some crazy like transformation scenes like we had in the original. We got a lot of gore and violence thrown in from these alien encounters, and just the right amount of scares kind of jumping out. You know, it's a bit more exciting in some scenes than in Carpenter's version of this, but you know, we get some other different characters thrown in as well. But aside from all those good things, it's not perfect. I couldn't put my finger on why, you know, while I had enjoyed this film originally and I bought it on Blu-ray, watched it once at home, I hadn't rewatched it in over 10 years. But on this viewing, I think I figured out why this one didn't really resonate with me to where I hadn't revisited it in a decade. So, like many prequels, I feel like this one kind of suffers from certain aspects that don't work for me in prequels, specifically the feeling of mystery and surprise like we had in Carpenter's original film. The reason is that in this prequel, the audience knows a lot more about what's going on than the characters do. So I felt like I knew everything that was happening to them. I understood this threat. It was not a mystery to me at all because I knew what this alien was from that other film. And so a lot of it, I also spent time kind of looking for those connections to the Carpenter film and seeing different points of it that will connect with the Carpenter film. So it's kind of distracting. And as I've said, for me, I've said many times, it's the mystery aspect of horror that I really like the most. And that's kind of what pulls me in the most as well. So without all that, though there was a lot to enjoy in this film overall, you know, with, you know, the effects and kind of paving the way, you know, and the pacing of everything and the acting and the story was one. The story, unfortunately, was one that I felt like I already knew and had already seen. So, why did this possibly not be as well received? And who is this film even for? You know, because I figure it seems to be for people who haven't seen John Carpenter's The Thing and also don't have any plans on seeing John Carpenter's The Thing. Because without knowledge of that original film of his, you would go into this one getting that mystery and those surprises. You would feel more like the characters not understanding what's happening and having things be a bit more frightening. But because you wouldn't, and you also wouldn't be looking for those connections to the other film to see where it's going to kind of match up with it. But here's the thing, if somebody hasn't seen the original thing and they don't have any plans to check it out, why would they even check out this one then? Especially given if they have any interest in checking it out, they may get a lot of recommendations about watching the John Carpenter version, since it's still considered by so many to be this perfect film. So it seems like the target audience was very small. People who hadn't seen the original have no plans on seeing the original, and nobody has been recommending that they watch the original first. So when you go in, you have all those same kinds of feelings where you're lacking that mystery. So yeah, at any rate, you know, and here's that, you know, quick kind of spoiler thing about, you know, the John Carpenter one. This film does have like a mid-credit scene where we're showing the dog that survived this film being hunted down, which of course leads right up to the beginning of the Carpenter film that, you know, some of that opening involves this dog showing up and people trying to hunt it down, and then they don't know what happened and they're kind of backtracking. So it's really cool to get that connection between the Swedish camp and the US camp via this dog. But yeah, I've definitely been rambling on that, but here are my quick takeaways for this. So the acting was great, had no problems there. I like how they laid this out as a prequel. It incorporates some physical effects to go with you know, to kind of complement the CG effects whenever they could. The CG used to show stuff was mainly for stuff that they couldn't really pull off in 1982, so we get a little bit more going on, especially with like the alien spacecraft and some of the like wider shots of the action scenes. The running time and length were fine. They were a nice tight hour and 47 minutes, and the musical cues were kind of cool because they had some musical cues towards the beginning and towards the end that were very similar, and maybe they actually had reused some of the Carpenter kind of soundtrack with that. The bad was just that some of the CG shots were a little bit rough, maybe a little bit too clean. It suffers from those prequel issues of knowing more than the characters, going into it and having no mystery or surprises, and instead more of like an expectation as to, you kind of know where it's going to go and you're looking for the references and where it's going to link up to the Carpenter version. But the verdict, I would say this is still an enjoyable one. You know, it's not as gripping as the Carpenter version, and it's not as scary, of course, since you already know what's going on, but, you know, because it's not due to lack of filmmaking ability, but just if you know that original film, this one isn't going to hit you as hard as if you've never seen that original film. But, you know, there's still aspects of it which are different enough from the original, you know, with this different cast of characters and a few changes within that storyline, that makes checking it out, you know, you can check it out as like with a different expectation of how to enjoy it, and as long as you go in with like the right expectations. But I'm in with that. Speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest video of mine. The Thing from 2011 is currently available on Netflix. I heard that it's actually doing quite well there, even though the film didn't do that well in the theaters. So it's nice to know it's trying to get that second life, to get some appreciation for what it did bring to the screen. So anyway, sound off in the comments. Have you checked out this one yet? If so, what are your thoughts? Was it a prequel worth making, or was it a waste of time? Would a sequel have been better to just build off of what happened after all the Kurt Russell and Keith David stuff at the end of the original, John Carpenter version? But anyway, sound off and let me know what you think. Thanks for stopping by and for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.